Hey, hello everyone. Happy first day of spring and welcome to Alta Journal's California Book Club. It's a thrill to be here tonight for Rita Bullwinkel, whose novel Headshot, right here, was longlisted for the Booker Prize this past year. She'll be joined with novelist and short story writer Lucy Corin, and of course, our host, John Freeman, who is working the night shift once again from an undisclosed location. My name is Blaise Zerega, and I'm Alta's Journal's editorial director. We've got a big crowd tonight, so I encourage everyone to reach out into the chat, say hello, exchange some words of greeting, and of course, let us know where you're zooming in from. I'm logged on tonight from San Francisco. And while you're doing that, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. Tonight's event is part of Alta Journal's California Book Club. It's our free monthly gathering celebrating books that help form a definitive guide to understanding life in the Golden State and the West. And in the weeks leading up to each club meeting, like tonight, our website, altaonline.com, we publish numerous articles, excerpts, interviews, essays about that month's pick. So if you haven't had a chance to check them out, please do so. All those articles are free. Check out fantastic essays by the host John Freeman, editors Anita Felicelli, David Julin, Emily Holman. We even commissioned a non-alcoholic mocktail tonight called the Headshot. It's kind of complicated to make. It involves cornflakes and milk. I haven't tried it yet, but let us know if you do so. And again, what you'll be signed up by joining tonight, you'll also receive an email tomorrow, and that's the California Book Club newsletter. Please check us out. Sign up for all of our newsletters. We really appreciate it. I guarantee you'll like them. And fun fact, every California Book Club event is on YouTube. So you'll get a link for that tomorrow, and you can share and go back and watch now, gosh, I think more than 50 episodes. This club would not be possible without the amazing support of our partners. They include the Los Angeles Public Library, the San Francisco Public Library, the Huntington USC Institute on California in the West, some great independent bookstores, Book Passage, Book Soup, Camino Books, Vroman's, Books Inc., Green Apple Books, Bookshop West Portal, as well as our fellow publications, Narrative Magazine and Ziziva. So please support our partners. Go visit the bookstores, buy books. If you already have a copy of Headshot, pick one up for a friend, please. And you too can support the work we do at Alta Online. Go to altaonline.com, please, and consider becoming a member. California Book Club members, for tonight, there's an offer for 25% discount on our all access subscription. So instead of $50, it's $37.50 a year. You'll get our oversized award-winning magazine, as well as a special book, a collection of the first 5 years of Altitude cartoons, which are the back page of every issue. And this particular issue features a folio by Rick Bass, and of course, a terrific essay by Rita Bullwinkel, and also a Why You Should Read This by David Julin. Or if you prefer to go digital for just $3 a month, you can sign up. I think that works out to like, I don't know, it's not much. You order any magazines on our site, it's free shipping, no tax, and you'll get them very promptly, I promise. I think that's probably it. And, there's all kinds of cool merch. Of course, our California Book Club tote bag, which is insanely popular. And the California Book Club hat, show people where you're from, wear it with pride. All right, folks, that's all I got for tonight. I'm going to hand it over to John Freeman. So John, over to you, please.
Thanks, Blaise. Hello to everyone from Pasadena, Portland, Pendleton, and other places not beginning with P. What a joy to be here. If I have to think about what makes the work of Rita Bullwinkel distinct, it's her ability to ask questions. Her essay for the California Book Club was entirely made up of questions, and that is unusual, except if you look at her work over time. She's always asking, what does it feel like to do something? What does it feel like to be, a furniture store model who receives a letter from a prisoner and decides to write back? What does it feel like to work at a hospital and detach and reattach limbs? What does it feel like to be a snake disguised as a pear? What does it feel like to be alive in a body today? These are all stories that are part of her debut collection, Belly Up, which won the Whiting Award and the Believer Book Award. And if you have read her book we're going to talk about tonight, it's worth a detour back through Belly Up because it asks extraordinary questions. What does it feel like to be swallowed by the floor of a church and to be in the belly of God? But the book we're here to talk about tonight, Headshot, in which 8 teenage girls enter a boxing tournament in Reno over 48 hours, asks a more mundane question, but one that is equally fabulous for all sorts of reasons we might talk about tonight, which is, what does it feel like to be inside the body of a teenage girl or a young woman? What does it feel like to compete? What does it feel like to want to win? When I moved to California 41 years ago, as a 10-year-old, I remember thinking, God damn, it's hot here. And I feel like I have to become a professional athlete. I went from a school in Pennsylvania where we could shovel and we could play in the gym, dodgeball, and living in California felt like suddenly going into the professional leagues of athletics. People were in sports all year round, swimming, playing water polo, in track, in soccer, basketball, baseball. It just went on and on and on. Boys, girls, people of all genders were playing in sports. And for me, California is probably one of the most sports mad places in the world. And yet somehow our literature has never captured that until now, until Headshot, this magnificent debut novel. It was longlisted for the Booker. And like I said, using one of the most nimble deployments of the third person I've ever seen, Rita Bullwinkel takes us into the heads of 8 teenagers who were boxing in a gym in Reno. Why don't we bring her on and we can talk about them and what it's like to get punched in the head. Rita Bullwinkel.
Oh my gosh, John, that was such a beautiful introduction. Thank you for it.
Hey, it's
Uh,
my pleasure.
Such a delight and joy to be here this evening talking with you about this book.
Let's talk about what ifs, because from the very beginning of your career, your work had a kind of surrealist edge. You were asking fantastical what ifs, and this book is far less fantastical, but yet it feels like hang gliding. It feels really daring, and I wonder if you felt that as you were writing, and if you had any answer to yourself as to why it might feel that way.
Oh, that's such a good question. Some language that my editor at Viking used to describe the book, which I really liked, was not quite realism. Um, I mean, when I was thinking about the world of the boxing tournament that the book is set in, I was thinking about it almost as a fantasy world, even though the confines of the book are ostensibly realist. There's no magic that happens, but my memories of competing in youth athletic tournaments were so surreal and had this sense of like the fact that I had visited almost like a foreign planet that I no longer had access to. And so it was the surrealness of my memories and the surrealness of my memories of driving to far out parts of the country to compete in tournaments where the rest of the world kind of fell away that I was interested in trying to capture in the world of the book. I
Mhm.
think that athletic facilities, much like architectural spaces like malls and convention centers, and airports maybe, have, there are these spaces that you enter and you can almost immediately see them as like abandoned and decayed, and they kind of look the same everywhere, like down to the hardware and the lighting. They have this like spaceship element quality to them. So I was thinking about that a lot in the way I was like building the world of this boxing tournament. In what ways could a boxing tournament be like um, arriving on another planet?
So if I have it correct, you can please correct me. You grew up in San Francisco and went to high school in Atherton. Is that right? Or
I went to high school in Menlo Park. I went to
all
Menlo
right.
Atherton High School. I was born in Redwood City. And like I spent a lot of time in the city because my grandparents and great-grandparents were in the city. They ran a local sporting goods store for those zooming in from San Francisco, on Polk and Jackson, called Lombardi Sports. And so my mom and everyone in the family worked at the store. So I was up in the city a lot, even though I never had like a mailing address in the city.
Sporting goods stores have a very particular smell. They're like
They
hardware
do.
stores. It's
They
like
do.
rubber. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who might remember Lombardi's, I mean, the shoe section, yeah, the rubber was so potent. Um, it was also the era, like my memories of being in the store, it was like a big deal that they could retail like surf gear. It was like the peak of Roxy and Quicksilver power. So I have a lot of memories of like the surf section as well. But yeah, the smell is very specific.
Why did they get into sporting goods?
Oh, this is such a good question. So, my hopefully there's no family in the chat who's gonna be like, that's you're not getting the story right. But my family like had been in the dairy business, and then my grandfather wanted to start a sporting goods store because he really loved hunting and fishing. And so originally the store, my understanding is they mostly sold um, guns and fishing rods and even some boats. And then as my uncles took over the business, they began to retail things like Nike and basketballs and that kind of thing.
And when you went in, did you feel as a girl that this was a neutral space, or did you feel like you had to de-girl yourself, or you could become a different version of a girl that you wanted to be?
Oh, such a good question. Something that I thought about after I wrote this book um, is the fact that I only had, for the sports I played, I only had male coaches growing up. And one of the reasons why I think that is because I think I'm like in one of the first generation of women that grew up like fully with the effects of Title IX. And so even though my mom is like an extremely adept athlete, like a championship senior uh, tennis player, I don't know her rankings as well as I should. She plays in this like senior tennis league. My understanding is that when she was in high school, there really like no high schools had uh, athletic programs. And so it really wasn't something that was a part of her life growing up or a part of her college identity, unlike my uncles and my dad who did play college sports. Um, and that is interesting to me that I think the reason why I never had any female coaches and why perhaps the space of the sporting goods store did feel uh, particularly male is because of this, in fact, bureaucratic but very effective law, which maybe that deeply affected my life, which is Title IX. Just in terms of, I think once colleges had to support financially women's athletics, there was so much more money funneled into scholarships for female athletes, but then also youth programs, right? Like you have to, if you're going to have a college water polo team, you have to have a 16 and under national team and a 14 and under national team and those types of things.
Mm. The book is a series of boxing matches between these teenagers, and the first one is Artemis Victor and Andy Taylor, and they have grown up not in your era, I would think. I think there's more. My guess is it's closer to now that Artemis comes from a family of girl boxers, and one of the things that you've done throughout the book is you kind of vague out or fade out most of the coaches and other characters. So the focus is in almost entirely on the boxers and what they're thinking, and if they have coaches. You don't do that thing which you've talked about in interviews of making the coach the most inspiring character that they want to please desperately. They're doing this for their own reasons. And I wonder if you could just maybe kick us off by reading a little bit from that opening, because it's such an incredible opening.
I would love to. I'm just going to read the first 2 pages from the first match of the tournament. Artemis Victor versus Andy Taylor. Andy Taylor is pumping her hands together, hitting her own flat stomach, thinking not of her mother sitting at home with her little brother, not of her car, which barely got her here, not of her summer job, her lifeguarding at the overcrowded community pool, not of the 4-year-old she watched die, the 4-year-old she practically killed, and his blue cheeks. They shouldn't give teenagers the job of saving children. It doesn't matter how many CPR classes you've taken. She killed the boy with her wandering eyes. His swimsuit had small red trucks on it. He looked like he was made out of plastic. The feel of his thigh when she pulled him from the bottom of the pool. Already dead, and the way it was so easy to grip because it was so small. She's not thinking about it. She's looking at the skylight and the light it's letting in on this shithole gym, and she's thinking about the things she always does wrong when she fights, her lazy left guard, the way her left hand slips away and doesn't protect her face. If she's not thinking about it, she's also thinking about the way Artemis Victor will get her. If Andy Taylor doesn't think about this fight will be over in a matter of seconds. Andy Taylor needs to think about her spacing and her stomach. Andy Taylor needs to think about her stance. They're still sitting and looking at each other meanly. They know each other, but have never fought before. When you join the Women's Youth Boxing League, this facade of a sports association makes you pay $200, and then you get a free subscription to their magazine, which profiles its members, young girl boxers, one by one. So you see who's out there, even if they are across the country, and you get a good sense of who you're up against, and you know who they've fought, and who they're going to fight, and what their favorite hobby is, because God only knows what kind of a journalist writes this excuse for a magazine, but whoever it is seems to think it is valuable profile information and that it should be included in every athlete profile, because in every issue there it is: name, hometown, favorite color, hobby, wins and losses, photo of the girl in gloves. The photo is a wild card because some girls choose to take it in their gym clothes while others choose to take it in halter tops, their hair down, their heads tilted, and their gloves resting on their hips. Andy Taylor would know Artemis Victor anywhere because Artemis Victor is the youngest of the 3 Victor sisters, a family of boxers whose parents come to every single one of Artemis's matches with shirts that say Victor, which is, of course, ridiculous, the proclamation of their daughters winning records on their chests. Everyone knows the Victor sisters and what they've won and what they've lost, and the judges treat Artemis's family like old friends, which in boxing is especially infuriating because the gray area of a call is often so present, and if you know a judge has a special relationship with the participants, you can't help thinking, I'm being slighted. This is the end of me. If only I had parents willing to befriend my coaches. If only I had parents who could get off work, who didn't work, who could come see me win. Stop there.
You can see why we have this book in this club just from that incredible opening. That's such a dazzling use of the sort of compound run-on sentence, which reminds me so much of every starting jittery feel at any kind of athletics event. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of the way that you manipulate and use sentence length and syntax to create different spaces within this space. The space being the day, 2 days, the space being the Bob's boxing gym, and then the space being their heads. And do you find that in order to move in and out, you have to do certain things that you could describe to us?
Well, that's such a good question. I'll try and answer it as articulately as I can. With the sentences in this book, and even like the overall structure of the paragraphs, I think of there being this dichotomy between the language that is like embodied, that the young fighters are experiencing when they're in their bodies, and then the language that is going on in their mind as they're kind of going back in time or forwards in time. And I almost thought of it as parts of the book were like above or below water. And I think of the like the parts of the sentence or a paragraph that are embodied as being above water. They require such intense clarity. Because being in a body has a clarity that when you're recessed into your mind, we regrettably often things get a little fuzzy around the edges. And yeah, when things become disembodied in the sentence, or the sentence begins to like depart into the deep interior of a character's mind, yeah, I was thinking of those as like the underwater sections. I mean, the sentences in this book, I do write aloud. I'm like deeply influenced by having worked with Diane Williams at Noon, who would have us edit all of the work she considered aloud. And that is a practice that I used with all of my writing, but used with this book. And I try and privilege this, like the sound of how a sentence should end or how long it should be over what is grammatically perhaps advisable.
I'm going to ask you a direct question, and then I'm going to bring in one from the audience, which is right on point, given we're talking about form. Have you? I know you've been in competitive athletics. One of those being nationally ranked water polo. Did you also box as well?
I have not boxed. I'm not a boxer.
You must be a fiction writer.
I know exactly. Most of my access to the sport came through this trove of YouTube videos that I found of young female boxers that would set up like a tripod and film themselves doing footwork for 6 or 8 hours at a time. And the purpose of they're unedited videos. The purpose of these videos is a personal archive so that the fighter, can go back and look at the difference between what they're doing in actuality and what they think they're doing in their mind. And this was a training technique that I used with great frequency as a water polo player. It was also a training technique that I used as a basketball player and as a runner and a swimmer. Perhaps many people here have used this technique. I mean, when I was doing it, it was in the era of the shoebox sized camcorder with the flip door, and memory was very expensive. So you would film something you were trying to correct, and then you would watch it for days, and then you would film over it, because the infinite space of YouTube did not exist. But yeah, it was through these training videos that I felt like that is where I learned about boxing, and where I felt like I had, and these videos never had any language in them. They're also where I felt like I had, when I first felt I really had access to the sport.
Beatrice from Oakland has this question. She's noticing that there's with a lot of the chapters, there's a kind of multi-paragraph opening and then smaller sections set off by stars, which she says to her feel like punches. Is there some similarity between what is literally happening, boxing in the ring, and the form you've given to the text?
Oh, you've put it so beautifully that I can only hope that that's what it is doing. When I was writing, I was thinking about it a little bit more abstractly, like as some type of just general pause or movement. There was a period when I was at a residency at McDowell when I had composed very quickly the first sections of this book. And I had a friend put up, while I was reading to try and edit it, I would read it, it was just the two of us. I had a friend put up a piece of white paper when I reached like the space breaks, which felt so satisfying to me because it was like a physical manifestation of the space breaks on the page. A little less violent perhaps than a punch, but it simulated my desire, I think, well. And I'm so moved and grateful that I think you are sensing its true intention.
There's a writer named Laura Vandenberg who's also pretty serious about boxing, who I think you acknowledge in your acknowledgments.
Yes.
Did you ever watch her box?
I have never seen her box in person. I'm a huge admirer of her. In all ways. Her writing has been so influential to me, and I'm very, very lucky that I was able to take this workshop with her at Breadloaf, where she described um, the interior mechanism of narrative propulsion like more coherently than I've ever. I can't even repeat. I couldn't possibly recreate it, but than I've ever heard it described elsewhere. And boxing is such an important part of her. Um, I think of her practice as a writer, and I've talked with her a little bit about it. I did, when the book was done, she was one of the first people that I you know, thought, oh my gosh, is there any way Laura would be willing to, um, look at it and see what she thinks. And I'm like forever in her debt and very grateful that she um, gave me a read and blurbed the book. So yeah, it's a boxing is a part of her life much more intimately than it is mine.
Which you can say is true of some of these characters. I feel like in the course of the boxing matches, some of them discover that it's not as important for them as they start out feeling like they want to be the best in the world. That's one almost consistent thing for all the boxers, especially more with Artemis Victor, who's fighting Andy Taylor in the first chapter, who comes from this family of boxers. And you have this kind of amazing set of I sometimes felt like I was in a cathedral and it was like stained glass and there were like four portraits on each side and the narrative intelligence was light pouring through these glasses because I
Oh,
just felt possessed by the intensity and high definition articulation of each character. And Cassidy Green has from the audience says, "How in the world did you come up with the personalities of all these characters? It's a lot of characters. Are some girls foils for others? Are there certain girls that represent something specific to you?"
oh, that's such a good question, Cassidy. I It was like both great fun and also a great challenge to have such a large maximalist cast. Um, I The way the characters came about, it was so I had like a I'm like reticent to call it a first draft. I had written something that was like hundreds of pages that was a first person past tense narration of just one female boxer. And I went to this residency, I went to McDowell, and I had reread, in a day these many hundreds of pages that I had written. And when I reread this, whatever this thing was, maybe it was a first draft, I don't know. I really felt that the only parts of that manuscript that had any energy at all were when the main character was in the ring and was fighting against another girl. And so, and that the confines of the ring and the lack of language allowed me to move in ways that narratively that were far more interesting to me than anything else I had written or made. And so it was then very quickly that I knew that that was the whole book. And I drew the tournament bracket. And maybe like 20 minutes after reading that, this fully abandoned manuscript, um, I made the tournament bracket and I named the 8 characters and sketched them out and didn't know everything about them, but like pretty closely knew who they were, and then wrote the book linearly from there. And so I think that the 8 main characters they, in some aspects, they are foils against one another, but I also think they're almost like fractured out parts of my own consciousness. The closest way I can come to thinking of it is I don't know if any of you have ever seen one of those experimental Shakespeare plays where one actor plays all of the main characters. But that's how I really felt with these girls, that I had to, they were all both like me and not me, and I had to have either real buy-in to parts of both of their strengths and like intense weaknesses. So yeah, they kind of just arrived, they arrived very quickly after reading this abandoned manuscript.
I think it's a good time to bring in our special guest, Lucy Corin, who's written a book called The Swank Hotel, as well as 100 Apocalypses and Other Apocalypses, which is a good description of this week, as well as Everyday Psychopaths. She lives in Berkeley, and I think you teach at UC Davis. Why don't you ask some questions of Rita here?
Hey Rita.
Oh, Lucy, hi. Thank
Hey.
you so much for talking with me this evening. I'm so grateful.
I'll talk to you any day about anything, but this especially. All of the time that you were talking about your work on the sentence, I was reminded of the passage in, it's near the center of the book, and it's a passage where you go into a sequence about hand clapping. It's very interesting to me, first of all, that like you start that interest in the very physical center of the book, and then one of the places it lands is one of the girls' memories of a game being about uh, words changing in the. Do you remember this game? I could
Yes.
find it, but it's not one of them that I marked. But I thought of it again during your conversation. And then I think the phrase that you use is that they turn into language sculptures. And there's something very interesting about the relationship between you choosing to bring in this idea of a hand game that comes from girl culture in the middle of this book, and how the memory that this girl is having of the particular game that affected her had her imagining the words turning physical too. So I wonder if you'll talk a little bit about the decision to bring in the hand clapping and how you think about that form of physicality and its relationship to boxing and to this girl's consciousness.
Lucy, I'm so glad that you have honed us in on that section. Yeah, I think one of my favorite like Easter eggs in the book is this section that's, I think of as kind of a theory and part manifesto on the possible meanings of girls' hand clapping games, which are this great mystery to me. Um, one of the real joys of bringing this book out into the world has been that when I've done readings, both like in the US, and I was teaching in Germany for a period of time last year, which was so wonderful. When I would do readings and I would read from that section of the book, I would almost always see some female attendees from the audience after the reading, finding another woman to see if they could remember some lyrics of girls' hand clapping games, which are really indelible for me, and I think for a lot of people. I think because they're repetitive things that you do at a very, very, very young age. The song that portion of the book is directly referencing is Miss Susie Had a Tugboat, which perhaps some of you know it. Miss Susie had a tugboat, the tugboat had a bell. Miss Susie went to heaven, and then she went to hello operator. So it's this song that has these like swear words snuck into non-swear words. The idea being that your parents can't get mad at you for swearing if the word is tucked into a real world. So you can say, you know, I've heard we can swear on this video call. You can say things like ass and all these other swear words if they're tucked into this kind of like neat rhyme. And I mean, it's kind of incredible to me that, you know, I meet women from all over the country, and the lyrics, they can change a little bit, but it's this really indelible thing, and it's such a physical thing, hand clapping. You know, I mean, touching someone is always very, very, very charged. There's very like extremely few social situations in which it's like socially acceptable to touch someone else. I think of them as being, I think there's like a few buckets, right? Of when it's like, oh, socially okay to touch someone. You know, one is like the romantic encounter, one is like, you know, in the confines of care, if you're like caring for a young or old person. And then there's like the transactional touch, like if you're getting a massage or if you're getting your hair done, or if
you're making a business deal.
You're making a business, exact. Yeah. I think I include medicine in this, like the medicinal touch is transactional. You know, I wish the state were more involved actually, but you know, there's confines around that. But then there's like sport, like the touch of sport, which is something really strange, which I think this book is really interested in, like this social situation and parameter that exists in our society in which it is socially acceptable to touch another human, and it is necessary. And in boxing, you know, that is slightly mediated by a glove, but I still very much count it as that. In hand clapping, you are touching someone. In dance, you are touching someone, which I include dance in like the confines of sport. And so I think that I immediately, when I got deep enough in the book, I was like, oh, these young women, they're touching each other in this very specific way. And it's a way too that I think, sorry, I have so much to say, Lucy. I'm so sorry. I think that in sports narratives, there can be at times in narratives or culture, this desire to ascribe libidinal desires to the sporting encounter, like the idea that it's a scrim for a sexual encounter, like you're enacting like the drive to sport is actually some action that is like a sexual desire that can't be let out in another way. For, you know, there's so many narrative examples I can say of this. A really obvious one in the culture recently is Challengers, the film. But I think that that's actually not usually what's going on in sport in my experience. I think it's something so much weirder and like so much stranger. And yeah, I think the impulse to want to play a hand clapping game, to ask someone, will you have this collective lived experience with me? Like spend these earth hours doing this thing. It's like a desire for a shared memory, I think.
Yeah, it's also another layer of the subversion, right?
Yeah.
You started off talking about the subversion that's in the language of the games themselves, but there's another form of subversion about doing something together, but not for the reasons that people might think that you're doing these things together. Yeah. I also was interested in the way that you moved. I think there's something going on about you talking about ways to, I don't know, I don't want to get too into the ways that I was trying to think about it, but I want to invite you to think about the transition that you chose from the very ending of the previous chapter, where you say, in crime television, very specific things need to happen. These last bout girls have to start with a body, then there will be a mystery, then there will be a false lead, and then a real one. And then one of them will win. And then you turn to the beginning of the next match, and that's when the hand clapping games begin. And I wonder what it that's not how hand clapping games move, is one of the first points that you make about hand clapping. And so I wonder if there's something else going on with like you are you thinking about plot? Are you thinking about the way people tell their stories? Like, what are you thinking about?
Well, I think, wow, no one has ever asked me about that sentence or that section. I think I was thinking about plot and the way people, both within the book and also the way people build their own narratives, because this book is structured as a boxing tournament where each chapter is a match, it has, I think, the gift of some built-in suspense of who will win, but also like the act of boxing and of sport is incredibly repetitive. It's like the same action again and again and again and again. And a great challenge for me was how to make the action new, how to like turn it another, like turn it even more, and so I think I was almost acknowledging with that end that of how the boxing match had devolved into crime television of like, here we are at the end of another match with yet another loser and another winner. And ultimately, like, don't worry, like, I'll give you a winner. We're going there. Like, you'll get there. But then, of course, I had a desire to break outside what I felt like I had covered in previous matches. And so I think as the book goes on, I depart more and more. And so that seemed like a good section to have, I think, probably the biggest departure from the boxing ring in the book. That I think of it as like my hand clapping manifesto. That's probably the biggest departure from the ring, even though I think it's definitely related to the boxing tournament. It is something that spends a lot of time outside of Bob's Boxing Palace.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's time for other people to come back in, but I wanted to ask you one more question, which is a little out of the blue, but I thought of it um, also during John's introduction about your history with questions, the different ways that your work engages questions. And I had thought of this game where I would just pull lines that I marked on my first reading and like ask you if you remembered writing them. And I sort of imagined this whole game, but then I thought, oh, one of the questions I had was a question, and I just wanted to ask you, how are your hands like and unlike the paws of an animal?
So I think, okay, I might misattribute, if I'm misquoting Joy Williams, someone help me. Joy Williams has this amazing quote that goes something along the lines of, the reason why it's interesting to write about animals is because animals make us ask what makes us human, and they inherently show us the porous border between us and everything else, us being humans. And in my own lived experience, I do think that about animals. I think it's very like emotionally potent to live with animals and to have relationships with them, and that they give me like access to this world that I think like my relationships with other living things, including other humans, sometimes doesn't. And so, and I think there is I know a lot of environmentalists really take issue with the idea that we humans are part of the natural world. It isn't humans versus the natural world, or isn't humans versus animals. We are animals. And of course, I think I think we are and we aren't. But I think that there are certain acts when you're really confined in your body, when circumstances of the world are pushing you into your physical form, that make you hyper aware of your animal self. And for me, it can be both a violent feeling, but also a relief to have that experience. And for me, elements of playing sport induce that, elements of extreme like physical bodily pain in the case of an injury induce that. And so I think that point in the book where she's looking at her hands and feeling like they're like not human hands, they're closer to perhaps like dog paws, is that her kind of feeling so pushed into her physical form.
Yeah. I love the way that you didn't answer the question. You just engaged it as a question. Really
Oh no.
just like you and just like
Lucy, why don't you stay on? Because we can have a kind of a three-way chat in this regard. Because this is a very heavily underlined book for me too. And a lot of the time that I spent reading it, I was really just dazzled by your associative logic of how things would be compared to other things, and at what point one of the boxers thinks I'm like a wildfire. I'm a wildfire, like sort of running down a mountain. And I really loved how you inhabited the sense of kind of controlled violence. I know boxing is I've boxed before too, and it's about form, and when you spar with people you become friendly, but the when someone is on their way to winning, they start to think about crushing the other person. And I'm curious about your inhabiting of that mindset with these particular characters.
Yeah, well, two things come to mind. One is that I do think this book has a tricky relationship with violence, which is maybe a reflection of my own muddled relationship with it narratively. I recognize, in talking about this book, many people have said, that there's a great deal of violence in it, but for me, like the loudest violence in the book is totally off screen. Like for what you say, John, like when you enter into a boxing engagement, it there's such strong confines about what can and cannot happen. And I know there's a lot of media about the long-term dangers of contact sports and of boxing specifically, but in fact, like there being like in general, my thought about like where one encounters danger, I think of like the danger that these young women feel like walking down a deserted street in a town they don't know, as being like the danger of that being like so much louder than anything that could like possibly happen inside the boxing ring, where the outcomes are actually very finite. I mean, I think that there is this element and about one of the characters like envisioning herself as a wildfire. And there's another character that really identifies as kind of like the slow drip of a leaky I had a lot of water problems in my house, not pretty recently. Lucy knows this. The like really destructive powers of water when it moves really slowly in a home that can be just like totally disastrous. I think part of my reach to that is that in order to believe you're like capable of triumphing in this world of the boxing match that these like young women have chosen to engage with, you have to believe that in some realm you have access to like some kind of power. And so I think that the fire and the water, it's like an attempt for these young women to find what kind of power they might have access to. I feel like it sounds so glib when I'm talking about it now. I don't know, John. I don't know if it was a good idea, but that's how it came.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you make if you make a distinction between violence and danger.
Yeah.
Because there is a scene where they go, one of the characters goes out because it's a 2-day match and goes out at night in Reno, and you're right. That's the moment in the book where I was like, "Ooh, like I hope she's going to be okay," because in the ring, even though she's getting punched or is punching, I don't think, I don't feel worried. But it's a sudden application of force upon each other's bodies
Yes.
which could be called violence or it could be structure. And I wonder if you had a similar reaction, Lucy, like when they go out at night in Reno, I thought, oh my God, here we go.
Well, then the other thing is it's the only time that you leave the space of the ring, and going out into, the real world, the rest of the world is palpably mysterious um and scarier. And you have this feeling that almost anything could happen. It's a deeply moody passage in a way that is tonally just different from everything else in the book. It's really striking, and it's placed sort of perfectly in that penultimate area of the book. It's really spectacular.
Rita, did you do any scientific research? Because I can't stop thinking about the kidney-shaped object like between my eyes that might hold all of my memories, that if I am in a extremely stressful situation where I might be being punched, that all my memories might start oozing out across my brain. Because I started to think back to like when I've been punched in the face and I thought, what was I was I thinking about anything else? But what tell us a little bit about the cognition of the cognitive science of what's happening on the page, if it's
Oh,
inspired by real or if it's inspired by sentences.
you know, uh, I think it's just inspired by sentences. No, I didn't do any biological research. I do just feel like when there are times when I have pushed my body to extreme limits, or like we talked about previously, like periods of maybe intense physical um, pain, or some might say disassociation, that there's this kind of like trove of memories and lived experiences that I think all of us have, that one just cannot escape. I'm sure there's probably a psychoanalyst that could help me better understand what's going on. But I, yeah, those things like from the passage I read at the beginning, there are those things for me that I'm always surprised when they like pop to the front of my mind. I'm like, oh, there it is again, there there it is. And it's kind of just floating somewhere, and I can never really bat it away. Um, and I guess I thought it was kidney shaped because it seemed, um, you know, the kidney, it's like such an organic shape, but I don't know if I have a good explanation for why I think it's shaped, that little like reservoir is shaped that way.
I mean, when I read it, the first thing I thought this is going to be a passage that goes into like the shape of the amygdala or something like that. And then to have it end up being a bean in a soup was just, it was like a hilarious, unexpected move into like the surprising and bizarre mental landscape of this girl. Yeah.
There was a request from the audience for you to read that section where we step outside the boxing ring.
Oh, that
It's
is,
called Deep Night. It's on page 151 in the hardback. It's
yeah.
it's towards the end, and it's
Well, there's two sections. There's night and
yeah,
deep
there's
night.
Night and Deep
That's
Night.
right.
Which one would you, I can do either.
I think Night is probably better for like time wise.
I think so too. Shall I go for it?
Yeah.
Night. Other people come to Reno to go to Aura Ultralounge, to go to Faces, to go to Splash and Lex and Dilligan's Saloon. People want to go to Nellie's and Club Vanity. What Artemis Victor wouldn't do to be inside Club Vanity. If Artemis Victor were inside Club Vanity, she would drink with a fake ID and mount one of the raised dancing platforms and dance until all of her clothes were turned into water. Artemis Victor would dance until she herself was water. Artemis Victor wants the liquid version of herself to get sprayed all over the floor. On the night of July 14th, while the girl boxers sleep, Reno's clubs fill up with adults looking for a theme park style evening. There are quarters in the casino's slot machines. The outfits the adults choose to wear out tonight are special. The 24-hour lights of the casinos are like the lights in the reptile tanks at the zoo. They're always on and always hot and blue, so that the insides of the clubs look like something other than day or night. It's as if inside these Reno clubs there is no sun and there is no moon. Inside the blue light, the adults become their theme park versions. Their skin looks better than it has ever been. Their bodies look slimmer than they are. Money runs through their fingers. They dance and drink and fuck with almost no effort. The adults wish they wanted anything as bad as these girl boxers want to be the best in the world at something. These girls boxers want to be the best in the world at boxing. The girl boxers sleep through the night. The girl boxers do not dream of clubs or casinos or dancing on the night of July 14th. Even Artemis Victor dreams only of winning.
Oh my God, that's so great. Lucy, when you were listening to that, what sort of percolates in your kidney bean shaped?
Well, one is that it's another one of those passages of like iterative forward momentum, right? And it's another one. And the other thing is that I was thinking about like the different ways that the book operates via accumulation. You know, if you think about like because we were talking about the hand clapping games, and I think that one thing happens in the sequence of passages about the hand clapping is that it sort of ends up being a bit of an ode to accumulation. And then there's the comparison to the boxing matches. Sorry, I'm just thinking aloud, but the comparison of the boxing matches as like, oh, it's supposed to like whittle away as the tournament progresses, but the feeling is of accumulation overall. And so there's a way that the building momentum of a section like that has a similar intensity of building, and it's one form of fright of the night, right? These adults turning into carnival versions of each other that I think contrasts with the next section about deep, deep night.
There's a lot of transformation in your work, Rita, and I love this book because you know I think this is such a big topic, but I'll try to squish it down. I feel like girl sports are often perceived to be more transformative than boy sports because they're the norms that girl athletes or trans athletes are breaking are different than the socialized norms that boy athletes are breaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like one of the things that you're just exploring in this book is like the way that people are acculturated, and the way that experience and activity teaches them things, and how within certain confines girls teach each other things. And you know, these matches are not everything, because inside their lives they're this entire world of the past, and then you give us this entire world of the future, but we have this window in which they can teach each other things only to each other, looking each other in the eye. And it made me wonder, like, what sort of things as an athlete you learned, other than like you know, you should hold your breath during a flip turn, and that running on the outside of a lane during the 800 means that you run 5 meters longer than the person on the inside of the track, and things like that. Are there things that you learn that you can articulate that aren't abstract?
Oh, that's such a good question, John. I do feel like part of my impulse to write this book was out of my own bafflement at the amount of my life I spent in sporting arenas training, and asking like, why on earth did I do this? What was driving me to do it? And you know, for certain male sports, there is some truth to the idea that training can possibly yield a like financial or societal success and a career, although it's that even in the realm of male sports, like very, very, very small. But with female sports, it's so small. It's like so, I think the top paying WNBA player, which has had the WNBA is having like a huge renaissance moment, which is so wonderful. I think they make like $72,000 a year. And the societal reward is so low that there is this question of like, why would one do this? Why would one do this thing? What is there to be learned or gained? Which isn't exactly the same thing, but is close. And I think maybe there is some connection between the sporting act and the creative act. I have a suspicion, that the willingness to obsessively do something without clear reward or to settle into the act for the act's sake, I guess that is very much my relationship with writing and art making. I believe that there is value for both myself and others for spending time with oneself and making something. It's so hard to make anything, and I have such deep respect, whether you're working in a medium of writing or you're working as a painter or in some other medium. I have like such intense respect for anyone who spends time with themselves trying to make something, because I think that the world just is not set up to support people making things. And so I do think that, yeah, the obsessiveness and ability or willingness to like throw oneself fully off the cliff into something that you kind of have to do with sport, that it's similar with the creative process. And so maybe I think probably does contribute some to why I feel comfortable in the realm of making something.
It feels that way on the page. Lucy, did you grow up spending a lot of weekends somewhere doing something hot and arduous, and that afterwards you look back on and think, why did I do all that?
Spend a lot of time cleaning barns. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's a particular thing about certain. Did you grow up in California too?
No, I was this was in the East Coast, Florida for a while and North Carolina for a while. Yeah.
How about you,
like
John?
I grew up in Sacramento mostly, and I still remember very clearly and have all the sun damage to prove it that my dad decided that we should pull the ivy out of our palm tree by hand rather than spend like $400 and like dig it up and have it be done in like 2 hours. So we spent like 60 days just dragging things out. And I feel like certain kinds of athletics are like that, cross country and track, certainly swimming, where you have to go into these kind of cathedrals in your mind to both protect yourself from pain, but also from the boredom, and to keep your mind kind of focused.
Yeah.
And I saw that a lot in your book, Rita, the ways that people tried to control their minds during athletics, the different characters and the different strategies. And I just thought that was so unbelievably brilliant. The from, thinking about pi to, counting things to, coming up with metaphors. It was just a clinic in just the different ways that minds conceive of competition. We're actually at 9:06, so I think it's probably around time that we should wind down. I'm really, really grateful for you coming along, Lucy, and asking some questions, and I hope your 8-chapter barn cleaning novel is coming along swimmingly.
Doing my best. Thank you. Such a delight to be here.
Yeah, and Rita, thank you very much. Blaise is here to tell us a little bit about our next
yeah,
activities.
but first I have to say thank you. Gosh, that was so wonderful tonight. Thank you. Wow, the readings were just fantastic and great questions, Lucy and John, of course. Thank you.
One thing I neglected to mention though is that Rita is also a full-time editor of McSweeney's, which I didn't want to talk about during the middle of a conversation about your amazing novel, but the fact that you can be that great at both things is really, it's just so remarkable and just worth shouting about. So Blaise has a copy that he's going to show up to people if they want to follow the Bullwinkle trail.
Such a great issue. It's
Oh,
just so good, such good work.
thank you so much, John and Lucy. Such an absolute honor to be in conversation with you, two writers and minds who I have just long admired. Blaise, thank you so much for hosting me with such elegance and aplomb. And thank you all so much for being here with me this evening.
Yeah, well, for everyone in the audience, tonight's program was recorded. It will be up on californiabookclub.com tomorrow, or altaonline.com. That URL also works. And you also receive a thank you note in the email with links to all the cool things that were discussed tonight, and as well as a special offer, a discount to become a member. Also, I can give you all a sneak peek. This is our next issue. It's being mailed out, I think, this weekend to subscribers. It's available right now, though, on the Alta store at altaonline.com. It's 25 books that define California. And it's just really fantastic. Trust me, I think you'll love this. And be sure to join us next month on April 17th, when we will host Ishmael Reed and his book, the iconic Mumbo Jumbo. And so please make sure you join us. Tune in next month. Check us out at altaonline.com. Pick up a copy of the new issue, and of course, support our authors and our independent bookstore partners. Get yourself a copy of Headshot if you haven't read it yet. And finally, we'd be grateful if you would participate in a 1-minute survey that's going to pop up as soon as we end the event. So thanks, everyone. Stay well, happy spring, and see you next month. Have a good night.